Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we can settle down, we'll go ahead and get moving here. If we can settle in, do we have a sign-up sheet out there somewhere? We do, yeah. And we have a sign-up sheet on the front table.
One from last week too.
And we'll carry over the speakers we had last week. As we said before, we'll address or give them the opportunity to address the committee before we go to the next list of speakers. So if there's any speakers, we have three items that we're going to talk today, and since I think we'll probably talk to the 380, the longest, and Chairman Weedower needed a minute to get over here. We'll do quickly, hopefully quickly, House Bill 122, and we'll talk about House Bill 249. 122, after the committee hears the presentation, there have been some changes in the bill. If the committee is comfortable with those, we would be in a position to move on 122 today. So with that, if we're settled and in place, I'll go ahead and officially call this meeting to order. The House Higher Education Committee is hereby called to order. And again, and for the record, we have three items on the agenda today: House Bill 122, House Bill 249, and House Bill 380. The only one of those three that will be available for action today, if the committee so chooses, will be House Bill 122. And with that, I would call Chairman Hawkins to the front and let him discuss some changes we've made. And I appreciate the gentleman working with me on some changes we made that I think could improve our proposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too appreciate your work on this bill. You know, last year we had 1008, and in that bill, the governor was removed as chairman of the committee, and a chairman was to be elected by the committee. The state treasurer was just attached as was a member of the committee just for administrative purposes, but Chairman Martin has pointed out some things to me that gives reason and good reason to make the change and substitute 122, and once again the governor is back in as the chairperson. So that's really the only change, and I appreciate working with Chairman Martin on this.
Members of the committee, that is what we've done to the bill to keep it in line. The sections 4 that move the assets and so forth over, but we've put the governor on the bill, as the gentleman said, and removed the treasurer, because the state treasurer is the administrative officer. So having that individual, regardless of who that is at a particular time, seemed to be prudent to have them not try to do two tasks. With that, are there any questions? Number 18, yes. The Minority Whip, Representative Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Hawkins, is it not true that this passed the House last year 159-0 and the Senate by a vote of 48-5?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? Further questions? I see no further questions. We did have that change that the gentleman talked about. Normally, we don't want to readdress the whole bill in the interest of time, but if there's anybody that would like to speak directly to the changes of the governor being re-included, I'd let you speak at this time in the interest of openness. I don't see anyone. I'm going to think the chairman doesn't need to close. You look like you've done your job. So I would say that this is available before the committee for action. HB 122 LC 540201S. This would be by committee substitute. What's the pleasure of the committee? Chairman Dubnik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move do pass.
I have a motion do pass. Is there a second? Second. I have a motion, multiple seconds. This item move forward, do pass. HB 122 LC 540201S. Is there discussion? Discussion on the motion. Motion is to move this forward to the Rules Committee with a do pass recommendation. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Your proposition passes. There's a form you're aware of that you fill out. If you'll bring it by, we'll sign off as well. Thank you very much. turn the table mic off, turn me back on. I have, I just sound this, and I'm going to be very brief on 249 because we want to move on to 330. We have people to come to testify. But I again share with you House Bill 249, and this is our modification to the completion grant. Having spoken to some folks around the Capitol, I have been advised that we would get support to stay at 70 and 45. I had mentioned earlier that I would be open to going lower. I have been advised that in the interest of staying toward those that are further completed, 70 is a good place to be. And so I would just wanted to sound that out. I also mentioned last time that we had $2,500 was total, and we are working on language that I'll bring before the committee for your thoughts and action on. Or you may just bring it as an amendment and see what the committee wants to do to allow a second opportunity for a student that receives $2,500 at 70% and has just a few percentage points, makes them eligible, but does not make it, make them required to get additional money, but makes them eligible for the completion. And I believe we should have gotten to you all the distribution of some of those monies. Did you all get those in your email boxes? About the okay, well, I will make a note and we will do that. And so we will entertain this a bit further down the line. If there's, I do have one speaker. I have a question for number 17. I'll take, and then yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just ask if we could look at lowering that beyond 70. I took into account what you said at our last meeting. I went back and asked around because one of the things I have had to see in my community is young people drop out of school on both sides, Coweta and South Fulton, and we'd love to be able to get those kids back and get some completion money for them. And so is there a possibility of looking at down to 60, or you're just going to stay at 70?
Well, yes, ma'am. I mean, here's the feedback I've gotten from talking, and perhaps we can talk offline after I'll give you a brief answer here. It is where we're at now. If we move it down to 70, we think it'll be fully subscribed, and the idea is to get those the closest to completion over the finish line. And when we hope we do, because if you will recall, we're going to status check this to see how we're doing with when we get a couple of years worth of students in, and at that point, funding availability, we can go down. And I never want to get ahead of the budget committee, but I have good hopes that we would be able to move the amount up to $25 million this year from the 10 for the next budget year. So we'll look for that in the budget. So with that, I have one speaker that if the committee will allow, I'm going to go and give you a opportunity. Ms. Young. There you are. Oh, you're going to. That's fine. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Young, Education Policy Analyst with Georgia Budget and Policy Institute. Thank you, Chairman Martin and committee members, for this opportunity to speak. I would like to testify in favor of House Bill 249. As a strong advocate for need-based financial aid, GBPI is in full support of lowering the threshold for college completion grants from 80% to 45% for two-year programs and from 80% to 70% for four-year colleges. Moreover, we hope that you will strongly consider decreasing the eligibility for need-based aid to include first-year students in the initial college-going phase, as we know that financial challenges greatly impact if a student can access college or even matriculate from high school to college. Need-based financial aid is an urgent matter. Georgia actually has 40% of undergraduate students who qualify for Pell Grant, which is a federal need-based aid program. I would just like to say that I acknowledge your efforts as a committee to ensure that Georgia is no longer one of two states that does not offer need-based financial aid. Now more than ever, I ask that you continue to lower that eligibility, please, with the purpose of establishing a comprehensive need-based program that ensures all students have opportunity to pursue post-secondary education beginning in their first year. As the General Assembly considers measures to allow and tax legalized sports betting, we would also strongly urge you to consider these revenues as a dedicated source for funding for need-based aid. Through the dissolution of student access loan programs and the aim of House Bill 1435 and now House Bill 249, as a former college counselor in Atlanta Public Schools, I would like to say thank you for your commitment to equity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Excuse me, I see no further speakers on this, and I don't see questions, so we'll carry this over again. Keep this in your mind. I think this is something that we'll be back to later in the week or the first of next week. With that, we're going to move on into House Bill 380. We're going to get to the speakers, and this is last. All right, we have the speakers from last week. I'm going to give the author of the bill, Chairman Wiedauer, a few minutes to tell us about the concerns of the committee that he addressed, so that the speakers that are coming forward, if they're coming forward to address the items that were brought up, would know the changes that have been made. Each of the committee members has been emailed a new substitute, LC 365507. The gentleman is going to tell us that he is working off yet another version, but he's also going to tell us only one word changed in that version, so you can literally compare line for line. I think the word article was replaced with chapter. Am I correct, Chairman Wiedauer?
Am I on? There I am.
Yes, sir. So if you would tell us
Yeah.
about the
I've just-
changes that led us from last week to this
Yes,
week.
sir. I just handed you just a 2-page document so you could see literally the one word change is highlighted there. It was chapter and now is article. So technically the LC number at the top of that page is what we're working off of. But since we had photocopied this already for everybody, we have trying to save some trees. So we will be walking through what you have in your folder is 5507 with that one word change. As you can see, handed out as 5517S. But walking through what you have in your packet, which is, again, 5507, we're walking through that. Real briefly, I want to say I appreciate how much input I've had from the committee. I think that I've taken in consideration all the comments, and we'll move through how we address those right now. So, if you will look, the first change you'll see is on page 6, lines 115 through 117. This is the change to the calculation of adjusted gross income. There are some concerns over, I didn't want to incentivize. So that simply makes this the calculation a little more simple, which is taking out the federal taxes paid as well as monetary winnings that they pay out. That's it. They'll pay taxes on all other income. If you will look at moving to page 24, lines 582 to 586. Give you a second to switch there. All right, this is, so Representative Holcomb had brought up some good commentary on making sure there was no conflicts of interest. So you'll see where it says it'll talk about who can. This is just avoiding the conflicts of interest. You can see that on, again, page 24, 582 through 586. You'll also see, we'll get to it further, we've addressed that in one other section to ensure that that no one is colluding through this process. If you will then turn to page 25, lines 607 through 609. This is just a clarification again on what who can offer prop bets, so that we close that loophole, make sure nobody else is betting on these things. And you can see there, all licensees are listed in those line items 607 to 609. Probably one of the more significant changes, other than removing the incentives out of the AGI, comes on that same page, line 613, where we've moved from 15% up to 20%. I'd tell you that, again, we don't really know how many people are betting in Georgia, right? It's all being done the cover of darkness. The two changes, the incentivized, or pulling the incentives out of the AGI, and this change to 20%, our revenue will look will be north of $100 million in the first year, as opposed to the original estimate of 50 to 75 million. Staying on that same page, there was a couple of questions by Representative Clark and Representative Barnes, just clarifying. We wanted to clarify this tax, the privilege tax in lieu of all other state. That's merely stating that this is in and of itself, if you're engaging in sports betting, you're going to be charged this tax by the state and no other local. So this is all done through geofencing. So they'll geofence Georgia. Okay, what this says is that I'll pick Marietta just because I grew up there. Marietta can't geofence themselves and add an additional tax so that a particular municipality would be adding a subsequent tax to it. It is only being taxed by the state. Page 27. Representative Perkle brought up some good points of, somehow or another somebody decides to, we'll use Tanya Harding as an example, lead pipe to the leg kind of thing, and they'll take the fine in the efforts of winning their bet. So in that section, line 665 through 669, we have made it pretty clear there that with the penalties there, and then you'll see it actually again. On page, you'll see the second one on page 29 and 30, where we get into raising the fines as well as requiring the forfeiture of any proceeds made from that illegal wager. Also on page 29, this again is where you see some language that's been added to clarify Representative Holcomb's concern over collusion. You'll see that line 723 through 727. I don't know. I know it was a long weekend. I did email this out to you guys. I hope you had an opportunity to review it, but I certainly will stand for questions. But those are the changes since last week.
Thank you. The committee have questions. We have, it looks like we have 8 or 10 speakers signed up to talk to us. We had advertised the meeting till 5:30. I'm told that some of the members are going to have to leave for other meetings about 4:30. So, but if there are questions, and to be clear, I don't know if I said that when we were here. We're here again to hear the bill today. There will not be action on this item today. So this is to hear from the gentleman, committee, to ask questions and continue to work on the perfection of the bill, as well as hear testimony from the citizens involved. Number 18 is that the minority whip, Representative Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick comment. Greatly appreciate the hard work and all the incorporation of the input from committee members. So just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions of the gentleman before we go to public comment on this? All right. You want to come back to join us up here, and we'll go down the list on this. Again, trying to stay within about an hour of testimony to allow to come back to the committee. We'll hopefully get folks in there. So looks like we got about 5 minutes if we divide the time along equally. So if we could do that, that's what I'm going to ask everyone to do. Again, this will not be a hearing. This will be a hearing only. We will not vote on this. We had a holdover sheet from the 16th of February. Some of the folks have signed up on the sheet today. If you're signed up on both sheets, we're going to go in the order first as we said we were on the 16th of February. So we're going to go down that list, and if you are on the second list, we're going to skip you as we're going to give everybody a chance to talk once before anybody comes back with us. So with that, Professor John Kind is our first speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Professor John Kent. For over 3 decades, I've worked with colleagues, taught, and published law, economics, and business studies on gambling issues at Emory, Mercer, UGA, and others. I've just retired to Georgia, and I take no consultant fees. Hundreds of academic and government reports confirming that sports gambling doesn't work may be found in the multi-volume United States International Gambling Report, multi-volume, hundreds of reports. Also in the multi-volume U.S. National Gambling Impact Study Commission, prompted in large part by UGA faculty and supported by virtually the entire Georgia congressional delegation, and by the recent Illinois Law Review. 9 articles, 14 blue ribbon academics from Emory Law faculty, UGA Terry Business College, and others. And geofencing does not work. I served, and to switch slightly here, I served as for decades as a chair and member of the University of Illinois Faculty and Staff Benefits Committee, as well as the State University's Retirement System Member Advisory Committee. Throughout the U.S., gambling interests are siphoning and misdirecting state funds away from education and public employee pensions. For example, big gambling has been largely responsible for taking Illinois from fiscal responsibility and solvency to $175 billion in unfunded liabilities, no state budget for 2 years, and half of Illinois governors going to prison, where they now make license plates. My wife is on a Georgia teacher's pension. Public employee pensions cannot be protected from big gambling's domination. Wake up, educators and public employees. The Georgia legislature appears now unable to derail big gambling's unethical, embarrassing, and illegal gambling bills backed by a judge's nonsensical opinion, financed by gambling supporters, and drawing legislators into court in a lose-lose court case. If legislators cannot stop big gambling now, legislators cannot stop big gambling in the future. My gray hair shows I wasn't born yesterday. Academic business models also show Georgia will lose its status as the #1 business location. Sports gambling also makes poor people poorer. Click your phone, lose your home. Click your mouse, lose your house. According to the medical community, gambling addiction is comparable to drug addiction. Illinois now has over 1 million addicted and problem gamblers, costing the state over $10 billion per year in socioeconomic costs, or $3 to $7 for every $1 in new revenues. What? Big gambling didn't warn about these issues? No. Watch out, Georgia. Don't do what Illinois did. Big gambling is seizing control. If you want to do the right thing, 98 to 99% of academics in this country will back you up. Thank you for your kind attention, and citations, multiple citations are in what I passed out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
And I'm glad to be now in Georgia.
We're glad you're here as well. We're working hard to lower your income tax rate every year. Am I right? Is this Mark or Mac Purnell? Mac. Can't tell if that's a C or an R.
It's a C.
Okay, Mr. Purnell.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for hearing public comment on this important issue today. I appreciate it, and I know this is an issue that we've had before us for a number of years now, a lot of discussion about it. I'll be very brief. My wife and I, we were in Tennessee, Nashville area a few weeks ago visiting some family, and there were a lot of sports betting advertisements. You saw billboards, mobile billboards and all sorts of things. And they had all sorts of different teams. They had all sorts of different sports, all sorts of different logos, there's a vast array of differences between all these advertisements, except for one thing that they all held in common, and that was at the bottom where it listed an addiction hotline, referencing the issues that are associated with gambling. In the very legislation you're considering today, there's similar language that would require such notice to be on all advertisements. And I think that's because we know what this to be true, that there are increased issues when you increase gambling. Mental health issues, divorce rates, family issues, suicide, crime, they all skyrocket when you increase gambling in our state. The Georgia Faith and Freedom Coalition is opposed to House Bill 380, but we thank you for your attention to this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Purnell. Do you care to take a question? Sure. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
A quick one. So you were there 2 weeks ago. Were you there for the Super Bowl?
I was not.
Okay, that's a question I have. So you were there like right after it,
Yes, sir.
and you still saw the tremendous focus on online gaming.
Yes, absolutely.
Could you recognize who they were focused at trying to get to engage in online gaming?
I can't speak to that, but the issue, I was driving on the interstate, so it was billboards along the interstate. I did not see specific establishments that had that, but we also know that gambling primarily focuses on impoverished areas, minority communities, and that's unfortunate that is the case.
Well, I just want to, Mr. Chairman, just follow up with the gentleman's testimony. Last year, where I live in cable has Tennessee and Georgia stations together, and somehow or another I got up on the Tennessee station, and I saw what you saw was an unbelievable focus at young men toward gaming during the Super Bowl. And I think we're putting our heads in the sands, as the prior gentleman talked and the other, that this will not be an issue for our young men in our state. And I appreciate you bringing this to us.
Thank you, Chairman Jefferson, and thank you, Chairman Parnell. And Chairman Jefferson, I'm going to ask you and ask all of them. We'll get to the time when we'll debate the bill when we have a bill, but let's try to focus on questions. Questions to the gentleman. Do you concur? The next name I have on the list, Nick Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez. We'll kind of line up here and give you an on-deck circle review. The next speaker we'll have that I have signed up is Mr. Ronnie Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fernandez. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Nick Fernandez, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Metro Atlanta Chamber. As we stand here today, Georgians are betting in illegal, unregulated markets all over the state, and we're seeing no revenue from that. And so we stand here today in support of HB 380. I think you'll hear from multiple folks today that we've worked with on this legislation. We feel this is a Georgian-based solution. We feel this is a solution that puts Georgia first, puts Georgians in the seat, education programs that are currently being funded through the lottery. We feel this provides an opportunity to add additional revenues for those streams. At the Metro Atlanta Chamber, we've been focused nonstop, and we recently just added talent as one of our strategic imperatives, and we feel through the revenues generated through sports betting, this provides an ample opportunity. As Chairman Wiedauer mentioned, with the raise in tax rate in the AGI, we felt this $75 million was going to be a modest amount, but certainly something that could go towards the backfilling of Hope Scholarship that's currently being done in the budget currently, or go towards college completion grants, as the chairman mentioned in his bill. But now certainly looking at the opportunity of $75 to $100 million, there's certainly a great opportunity for Hope Scholarships, Hope Career Grants, college completion grants, pre-K funding, all the current avenues that the Hope lottery funds are currently going towards to be benefited through the sports betting revenues that would be generated through this bill. As well as I want to thank Chairman Wiedauer for the inclusion of Type 1 eligible entities in this bill. We certainly understand that as we look at setting up a framework that allows for our state to regulate and operate sports betting, putting Georgia-based brands and corporations along with a mix of open licenses for a mix of licenses to ensure that there's opportunities for operators to also get into the business here in the state of Georgia puts a very mixed and certainly a very good market together for our state. And then last, just want to thank Chairman Wiedauer again for his support for this and for certainly putting everybody together into work and for bringing together a bill that has a lot of support from folks that have been working on it for a long time. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. You have one. Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for bringing up this point. It appears that the thrust of your testimony was we have illegal sports betting going on right now, so why don't we tax it? You know?
Yes, sir.
And so the question I have is, are you aware of any measures in this bill, and perhaps I'll bring it up with the author later, that would keep me? So if I take my phone out now and I'm using whatever to illegally bet right now, are there provisions in this bill that will keep me from doing that, or does this create an unfair advantage for the illegals because now they don't have the same regulatory hurdle that we're going to put on them?
Yep.
Do they have? I mean, does this bill address that?
Yes, sir. And I'll certainly allow some of the folks here that do represent operators and deal with this more and let them speak to this. But certainly, I mean, when you still allow for someone to bet illegally offshore, or say it's with someone locally, there aren't any regulations in here that would prevent them from that. Certainly, current law criminal law makes it illegal to place a bet. And this bill would change that a little bit with the bets that are being placed under this code section. But I do know the chairman as well mentioned in his first testimony that there have been cases recently, and one federal indictment of someone that was running an illegal sports betting operation in Georgia that was recently indicted. And so I do think there's an increasing focus on illegal sports betting now that the legal market is coming up. With that in certain states, but certainly this bill would focus on the regulated market and not would still allow for that opportunity, but this certainly provides a better framework for folks and Georgians to bet on that would ensure that their bets are protected and their money is insured.
Did that do it for you, Mr. Chairman?
It really didn't, but I'll talk to him offline.
Well,
Yes, sir.
let me give an analogy, if I might, if you care to, and then we have two more questions. I think it would be if you needed a product, right, and you had to buy because it wasn't available. You had to go to, someplace in a warehouse and take cash and buy it, and you don't know if the product's good. Say you would be buying pharmaceuticals, legal pharmaceuticals. If those weren't available and you had to go buy it, if it's the only place you could buy it in order to get the medications you need to stay alive, you would do that. And that's what people are doing. It's the only place, if they choose to bet, they would bet with people that may or may not pay them if they win. And I think given the choice, people may go to a regulated market to do business with people that they can go to the Georgia Lottery Corporation, or they can go to somewhere else and complain if they're not being treated correctly. But I'll leave them to get a better thought of it. I think given the opportunity to go to do business with a regulated drugstore as opposed to going to the back of a warehouse to get your medication, I would go to the drugstore. That would be the best analogy I got. But we got a couple more questions. Number 29.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Knight.
Thank you. Nick, I guess we're hearing different viewpoints from those that are signed up, and I think this is a legitimate point. Obviously, we're hearing a lot of support for this measure from the business community. We still talk about our number one, place to do business, revenues, all of that, but we just heard two speakers that got up and said, hey, this has happened in other states where it has, quite frankly, had the opposite effect of on that on their states that they have come from? I think that's a fair question. And
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know how, obviously, more revenues could do a lot of things, but I think, in all fairness, could you address or we start to talk about some of the other states and some of the maybe not so good things that have come along with sports betting?
Yes, sir. And I certainly think this bill does strike a balance between that. I know there's provisions in there that certainly address not only within the industries or the sports teams, ensuring that there's integrity that remains within the sports, but also provisions that protect consumers. So being able to limit the amount they wager, ensuring that we've got limits on how much they can deposit if they so choose, or in ensuring that they can self-exclude themselves. I definitely think there are processes within the bill and some language within the bill that certainly protects consumers. And then also, I think there's certainly through the rules and regulations processes, sports betting in different states has come online, and as other states have started looking at what's the best policies moving forward. One thing that we do have at our advantage by being a little bit later to the game is we can learn from those other states. We can see what's being done in other states around rules and regulations to ensure what the industry looks like, as well as what protections are currently in place for consumers. And I certainly, I think having this as an entity underneath the Georgia Lottery Corporation that cares about Georgians, cares about what the product looks like, will certainly ensure that we have a process in an industry that protects consumers.
Thank you. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Chairman. So is it accurate to say that the Metro Chamber is for this measure thinking or hoping that there will be from top to bottom a Georgia-based gaming company operating games in Georgia?
So just want a Georgia-based company. So we certainly, at the Metro Atlanta Chamber, I think the number one reason we got involved in this bill from the onset was the opportunities for the additional dollars for education. So we certainly saw this. We worked with Chairman Martin on the college completion grants. We saw this as an opportunity to provide additional resources for that, certainly for the Hope Scholarship as well as pre-K funding. So we got into this initially from a supports position of what it means for education. Certainly from our board and from our investors, they've also asked us, hey, this has been something that's been debated down at the Capitol. We certainly have some investors on our board that have an interest in this, and so we've certainly looked at this, but education has always been the number one reason we got involved in this and what it means. You, Mr. Chairman, as well, we have always gone down this path as well for major sporting events. While there's nothing in this bill that deals with major sporting events, we also feel like the offering of sports betting is something that would enhance our ability to recruit major sporting events possibly, and as well as something that would add on to sports betting. As we see major sporting events come here to Georgia, that also means provide additional opportunities to have hundreds of thousands of people here from out of state that would be betting on those sporting events. So,
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few comments and a question or two, if I may.
yes, sir.
Is it not true that this bill, particularly on line 665 through 669, would essentially indefinitely prohibit a person who knowingly violates certain provisions of this bill, including advertising to minors, such that they would no longer be able to bet if they do violate provisions of this new regulated industry if it did become the law of the land here in Georgia?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Would you take one more question, if I may?
Yeah.
So is it not true that under the Georgia State Constitution, there were three prohibitions to gambling, broadly defined, including lotteries, parimutuel wagering, as well as casino gambling. And for 27 years, after the Georgia State Constitution was amended, for 27 years, lotteries have been legal. Have there been any greatly detrimental effects of having the Georgia Lottery in the state of Georgia over the past 27 years? And with this sports betting endeavor falling underneath the lottery as a lottery game, Based on what we've seen over the past 27 years, do you anticipate some of these negative implications that have been raised so far?
No, I mean, I certainly understand that there will have to be resources in place for problem gamblers, and this bill does address that. This bill ensures that we have resources going towards problem gamblers. The lottery, as you mentioned, for 27 years has had a problem gambling program set up in place to ensure that even for our lottery customers or consumers that they're protected, or if they feel they're going down the wrong path, they certainly have an opportunity and a place for them to be able to get the resources needed. I certainly think through the operational expenses that and the licensing fees that will be paid with this structure, those funds can certainly go towards the need for problem gamblers. But no, certainly I think we will see a balance between ensuring that we've got the programs in place for problem gamblers. We've got legislation that it singularly addresses problem gamblers and what you can do as a consumer to prevent yourself from going down that path, as well as
I'm going to reel you back in. I think just in the interest of time, we'll let you off the hook. We'll let the Chairman Wiedauer address the specifics of the bill when he gets back here. I think the answer is to your question is the Georgia Lottery does, in their advertisements, if I'm not mistaken, also advertises a number that you can call if you think you're buying too many lottery tickets. So are there, has it caused issues for some people? I'm sure it has. Have millions played without it causing issues? I'm sure they have. Did you have another question from?
Thank you, Mr.
I
Chairman.
just don't want you don't have to get into the weeds of that with us. We have. Did you have a question, Representative Bernard of Mr. Fernandez? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ronnie Chance. I represent the National Football League, and on behalf of the NFL, we support this legislation. Thank you very much.
Man yields back the remainder of his time. Going further down here. Okay, that was so quick. I didn't give Jeremy Kuden. And did I get that right, Jeremy? Are you here?
Mr. Chairman, Jeremy couldn't make it today.
Okay.
We have a member.
Okay, I'll let that person stand without objection. Just identify us, if you would, sir, for the record.
Hi there, I'm John Mormon, Government Affairs Counsel with DraftKings. Chairman Martin, members of the committee, I want to thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'm here today on behalf of the Sports Betting Alliance, made up of DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, and Fanatics. Collectively, we make up around 80 to 85% of the legal mobile market in the United States. We want to thank Chairman Wiedauer and his co-sponsors, Chairman Martin, Chairman Stevens, Representative Williams, Evans, to name a few, for bringing this important legislation. This bill in its current form represents a compromise between many stakeholders, not the least of which is this very committee and the other members of the Georgia legislature. Although the Sports Betting Alliance would have welcomed promotional deductions and a 15% tax rate, we heard a number of the concerns in the committee last week and are now amenable with the bill no longer allowing promotional deductions and having an increased tax rate of 20%. The sponsors have also punched up the provisions that ensure integrity within the sports wagering markets and have increased the criminal punishments for bad actors. This collective compromise is something the Sports Betting Alliance, Caesars, and the Metro Atlanta Chamber, as you've just heard, and their sporting partners all support, because we know this increases the possibility of bringing legal, regulated sports wagering to the state of Georgia. That's all I have. If happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Questions for the gentleman? Question for Mr. Mormon. Did I get that right? Tell me your last name.
John Mormon.
Mormon. Question for Mr. Mormon. I have no questions, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul Smith. You too have to react without an on-deck call, sir. My apologies.
No problem. I do want to thank the chairman for allowing ample testimony on this legislation. We appreciate that. I want to thank the author for being accessible and transparent in this legislation. I am Paul Smith, Executive Director of Citizen Impact. We are a network of pastors and their churches across Georgia. I don't have an accurate number for the number of churches we represent, but 2 weeks ago today we had about 100 pastors and faith leaders here at the Capitol for our annual Pastors' Day event, and so that's probably a fraction of the churches that we represent. Regarding my testimony today, I do want to make a distinction between the type of gambling we're talking about today versus, say, an office pool on the Super Bowl or a Friday night poker game in someone's home. We're here to oppose any expansion of state-sponsored gambling that is run as a business within the state and under the auspices of the state government. Our forebears here in Georgia thought that this type of gambling was such a negative impact on our citizens that they not only determined it should be illegal but unconstitutional. And I know that certain entities will no doubt profit greatly from this endeavor, but we believe that the citizens of Georgia will not. One of the arguments being made to support this is that reportedly illegal gambling is already taking place in Georgia, but according to the website StopPredatoryGambling.org, the primary source of that information for the size and scope of illegal sports gambling in the U.S. has been the American Gaming Association. So obviously they have a financial interest in this endeavor going forward and seeing commercial gambling expanded. But they also state that no American jurisdiction has ever documented a decline in illegal gambling after states began sponsoring gambling, whether it's lotteries, casinos, etc. So I think one of the members of the committee even brought that up. There's no way to show that this will reduce illegal gambling. Some people have kind of, for lack of a better word, scoffed at the slippery slope argument that those of us who oppose this often make, that one form of gambling will lead to other forms of gambling, that isn't necessarily the case. And of course, it isn't necessarily the case, but history and common sense will tell us that once you have expanded gambling, it'll be easier to expand it further. And I actually had written down that we had heard from legislators in the past, but we've actually even heard today in testimony that, well, we already have the lottery, and we already have state-sponsored gambling. So, as if what's the big deal in taking another step? Well, again, that's the slippery slope argument. Now that we have one form of gambling, the lottery, it's a little bit easier to expand on that and add additional forms of gambling. One thing that I don't think is in great dispute is to expand gambling in this way will lead to more addiction, more gambling addiction and problem gambling, more bankruptcies among Georgia citizens, and other negative impacts on the families of Georgia. That's why we oppose this legislation, but also I want to add that the fallout from that will no doubt impact the pastors that I represent as they try to help these families through these difficult bankruptcies, broken homes, and other gambling addiction. So I would just want to state our opposition to this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you stand for questions, sir?
Yes, sir, of course.
Is that Chairman Carpenter?
Thank you very much. We're all usually on the same side on issues. My question to you is, does your organization, does it support investing in the stock market?
Investing in the stock market is neither illegal or unconstitutional, and it is intended to benefit both the investor as well as the business that it's investing in. It isn't intended to be predatory, particularly against most vulnerable communities.
But could one argue that that is probably a legal form of gambling in the United States, or cryptocurrency, or opening restaurants, pretty gamblish? So I think we talk about a lot of things in the state that people do, and I would say if 1 out of 3 restaurants fail, that's a heck of a gamble. You're probably better off scratching off lotto tickets. But I guess my point is people are doing it. Obviously, they're doing it, and
if we can.
Yeah. And is it not true that providing an opportunity for them to do it in a much safer manner is, if it's already occurring, is a fair argument?
If you're asking me that question, at the risk of getting into a debate, I don't think expanding and making current things that are currently illegal legal is a good direction to go, whether we're talking about gambling, prostitution, drugs, or anything.
Okay, fair enough.
And I was just saying, we're not going to get in debate, but you feel free to answer it as fully and truthfully as you like.
Trying to be
and
succinct.
No, yes, sir, and you'll never have any problem with it. I want to pose a question if I can, and this I don't mean in an argumentative manner, but I'm not surprised that there are no studies that show that after a lottery is in place or after legal gambling is in place, that illegal gambling is reduced. Much like you can't prove a negative. I mean, if one knew that illegal gambling was there, you would have stopped it. So, it's happening by definition. So I understand your resistance. I have, I know people and respect your thought on that. But I would just, pose that as something to think about. Of course not. My hope would be, should this committee move this forward, should this go through the process and become law, that it would be like the analogy I gave, that if someone were going to do it, it would provide them a safer thing. I know what it would do. It would not allow them to wager, to buy a lottery ticket with money they don't have. And that can happen in illegal channels now. They can let you get in, quote, if you will, over your head and come after you. So we would hope for that. But you're right. Neither you, sir, or I can look into the future with that. And I appreciate your thoughts. And
it might be in the interest of the same organizations that provide the current statistics on illegal gambling to provide the statistics afterwards of the reduction in illegal gambling. But I will, again, thank the author for attempting to put robust regulations on this. I asked him today about enforcing those, and that's where we're talking about geofencing, whether we're talking about age restriction. I do have concerns that even the regulations proposed will be adequately enforced.
Yes, sir. And I'll use this as a time to say, isn't it true that chairs had additional conversations with the author about some further penalties? And then I'll sign this out for the people that are in the room that, perhaps this is not the right environment, but if one is caught doing something improper in there, more than losing the wager you sought to gain by doing something improper, perhaps it is a situation, I believe in legal terms they use it, treble damages. If you to act improperly, or you to do something that you stand to lose or be fined more than you stood to gain, maybe 3 times. So there are things that this committee continues to work on. Again, there may be places we don't agree, but we all, I think, will agree if it does go forward. We want to make it the absolute best and safest we can for the people of Georgia, and we want to keep the money in the Lottery Corporation as it's constitutionally allowed, and focus that on education. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the respectful dialogue.
Yes, sir. We've completed our list this afternoon. Mr. Griffin, you signed up again today. I'm going to allow you. You spoke the other day, but you signed up again, so you obviously had something else to do it. And you were very brief the other day, and I appreciate you
I had the
having
60-second rule the other day.
Yes, sir. So that's why we're coming back to you. I just let everybody go that had signed up first before we invited you back a second time. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're very gracious. I appreciate your committee as well, and hearing the opportunities for people to speak on this. My name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And again, the latest census shows that we are part of Southern Baptist, who are the Georgia Baptist, and that the latest census show that we represent about 1.5 million Georgians. And we have passed 22 resolutions against gambling since 1963. And we just passed another one, which I gave out to you the other day, which I have copies if anyone would like to have it, that was just recently passed on this as well. And again, our concern about this issue from the moral standpoint is that it ends up being legalized fraud. I mean, that's basically what gambling is. When you talk about gambling, it's gambling. And typically the things that go with that are just going to be there. It's going to be impossible. It's kind of like a dead fish that you don't freeze. It's just impossible to get the smell off. It just is what it is, and it creates a lot of problems. The second issue I have here is socioeconomic issues that go along with it. And I mentioned that Todd Jones, Representative Jones, who was the co-author of the mental health legislation, talked about the fact that it's intellectually.
Mr. Griffin, would you just suspend a second? I am needed upstairs immediately. Representative Carter, will you come? Carter Barrett, Representative Barrett, will you come and sit the chair for a second? Thank you very much. I'll be back shortly. Thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The point is that, Representative Jones mentioned that it's intellectually dishonest to talk about the benefits of gambling without at the same time talking about the detriments. And there's no doubt that we do have a gambling problem in our state regarding sports betting. It's definitely, there is a fire raging in our state. But what we will do, and this has been my experience, this is my 16th year down here at the Capitol. I ran for state rep. I've been a minister for 40 years in the state of Georgia. Legalization equals participation. In other words, the more you legalize something, the more people are going to participate in it. That's particularly why these commercial industries want more legalization on whatever the product is that they're out there selling. It's going to happen. So we have a fire. If you had a fire, had you rather put gas on it or water? And this is just simply going to put gasoline on an already existing problem. And I'll give you an example. Professor Kent and I were part of a gambling symposium, and we were against it, by the way, held here at the Hilton downtown. We had a number of legislators that came to hear us talk about, just from an academic perspective. And they said, well, can you take what was like in the Illinois Law Journal, and can you take that and put it into a one-pager? And we have that on the Georgia Baptist Public Affairs webpage called The ABCs of Gambling. And we took that and boiled it down to the systemic problems of gambling will just be exploded in the state every time we legalize another form. And to give you an example of that. In that study, it shows that 69 to 90% of the income in the gambling industry, as a general rule, and I know that's kind of broad, gets its income from problem and addicted gamblers. So we're talking about fencing this thing so we can make sure there's no illegal activity, not as many people wasting their money, blah, blah, blah. Well, then you're going to lose 69 to 90% of the income that we're all bragging about that's going to go into the industry. It's going to help, supposedly, the children, which is always an example here a lot of times about why we ought to do things. And yet legalizing vices rather than focusing on virtues ends up destroying our children and hurting them more than we're helping them. So the socioeconomic situation, and I know when you're looking at gamblers, you're only talking, addicted, you see 4-7%. When you look at problem gamblers and addicted gamblers, problem gamblers are the ones on the way to being addicted. That may be 20-25%. 75% of the folks probably don't have a problem with gambling. But that's not where the revenue's coming from. It's coming from the problem, and which will be exponentially exploded here in the state if we go that direction. And then the third reason is, the legal issue. I just simply do not believe this is constitutional. This is not my first rodeo down here. And I can just tell you, I have a legal document here from the Attorney General's office in 2016. Ron and them can tell you I've been dealing with daily fantasy sports and all of this for years down here. And we have this legal opinion showing that you can't do this without a constitutional amendment. Now, they were not trying to put it under the lottery. I understand it. But to me, it appears there's some hermeneutical gymnastics going on here to try to make something happen or to try to find a loophole. And then you have John Barra, who, former congressman, attorney, wrote an opinion, AJC, said, this is simply not legal. It's not going to happen. You get a legal opinion that was financed by those that are for the gambling. That's kind of like the fox in charge of the hen house kind of attitude there. So I expect them to be for that, and that's justified for there to have their opinion on that as well. So the legal issue, and also at AJC, started out in 2020, 57% of Georgians were for sports betting. Guess what the latest went out? 49%. It's going down. California just didn't get one passed that they tried to do last year over there. I only got, I think, 38%. And I know it had Indian casinos in there with it as well. But you thought in California, well, they see, again, the problem that we're having here. And then lastly, and that's the integrity issue here. In 1992, only sports betting there was in a casino. The people in the state of Georgia did not believe they were adding anything legally as gambling in our state but the lottery. Okay? There's an integrity issue here. If we say we're doing it because we found a loophole that we couldn't find for 20-something years, that makes it look like the next time we put a constitutional amendment, we don't really know whether that really is what it means or not, because they might find out something 10 years, they're going to do something that we didn't vote for. Again, I'm not for putting it on the ballot because I think you have a responsibility not to put something that would be dangerous. But parenthetically, if this is to be legal, the people have to say the final say, not the legislature. So these are just some of the things we just wanted to bring to your attention here today. We are concerned about it. And again, you're talking 75 million, 100 million, but the study that we had that we took and boiled down to Georgia, you could be looking up to $500 million increase, in Department of Health issues related. I mean, you've got a 1 to 3, a 1 to 5 ratio on every dollar you raise from tax revenue, costing the taxpayers and the government an additional $3 to $5. So those are some issues, and we hope you'll take those in consideration when we oppose this legislation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Griffin. Are there any questions from anybody from Mr. Griffin? For Mr. Griffin, we've got Minority Whip Park.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Griffin, I appreciate your testimony. In 1992, did the Georgia Baptist Convention oppose the constitutional amendment to permit gambling in the state of Georgia through lotteries?
I'm sure they did.
Do y'all still oppose the lotteries and the $25 billion that the lotteries raise for purposes of education?
We are opposed to any gambling, period. Okay. And we are not opposed to the lottery. It's the funding mechanism that's the problem. And again, recent stats have shown, even from Duke University, that of those that are targeted by the lotteries are particularly minorities and poor districts. And some of them, a third of them, are seen to spend as much as half of their income a year on lotteries, which creates another funding need to help them out and their families. And don't believe me, take your computer, type in gambling or type in addiction in the lottery, and you can see the stats yourself. The lottery is having a devastating effect on our state now. That's why you have such an increase in the playing the lottery. Why? Because they were taking the extra money they were given to help their family, to feed their family and pay their rent, and playing the lottery, blowing their money. I literally had somebody tell me the other day, you can go on YouTube and show a guy, I think he had over $100,000. He just went out and bought a bunch of lottery tickets. And on both occasions, he still never won more than he spent.
Thank you.
It's rigged. It's going to hurt our folks. And it is hurting our folks. Thank you.
Chairman Perkle, you have a question?
I do. Would you stand for one more, Mr.
Yes,
Griffin? Sir. One of my favorite movies, Casablanca. I am shocked to find out that gambling is going on in here, said Captain Renault. We have talked today, and you have mentioned, gambling is going on. Sports gambling is going on. All I know is anecdotally. So, yeah, I'm not, anecdotally, I think it is. Through your studies, and I missed some of those, I was trying to jot down some notes. Do you have a good handle about how much of that is going on? And you mentioned a pretty high percentage of problem gamblers in legalized settings. Problem gamblers, those that I think it's mentioned before, this makes poor people poorer. Those that can ill afford to do the next wagering, but they must do it. Are we seeing a an increase by those that are doing it illegally now, and as being problem gamblers?
I just
Or do
know
we
that
know?
national stats put on a Georgia timetable would show that we would have 110% increase in addiction if we continue to bring about more legalized gambling. If you take a snapshot from 2022 in Tennessee, their addiction line went up 800% just in one snapshot. So we don't have a lot of data, and it's hard to get data from things that are illegal. And so it's the fox that's telling us about the hens, that's saying there's this much money out here. And then we're talking about we're going to do this great job of not letting the addicted and the problem gamblers gamble. Well, if we do, they're not going to want to come to Georgia because they're not going to make no money. I mean, really, I'm just being honest with you. But I don't believe we're going to be able to rein it in like we – listen, I've been dealing with this for years, and I'm not want to get into alcohol and the whole thing. But unless you can have wonderful regs, but if there's no enforcement and if there's no willingness to deal with that situation, it gets out of hand again. So sometimes it can actually, and it will actually, it can get worse if the regulations aren't enforced. But anyway,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I follow up on the
Yes,
Tennessee number, the 800%? What is that in terms of actual numbers?
I don't have that
Did
right
they
in
go
front of
from
me,
one-
but again,
one to
you can,
8, 10
you can
to
probably
80?
Google it and find it because I found it on the news report from
No, that
Tennessee.
would be, I was just interested because
I don't know what that 800% was the increase of in raw
I mean,
numbers.
there's obviously a huge difference between 1 and 8, and
Well, they were just saying,
1,000
you
and
know,
8,000.
right?
So-
I think apparently they already had that addiction line, and when they legalized it, it actually made it worse. That's my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look for that. If you
Right.
find that, I would love to.
Sure.
I would love to have that, and I'd share it with. the
Right, like I
community
said, if we
as well.
just took the general numbers across the country, you're talking a 110% increase. You're
But-
talking a
but,
third of
I
those
mean,
people will try to commit suicide.
Again, before this
Right.
committee, I'm going to ask the same thing of you that I ask of everybody else.
Yes, sir.
Is if we throw out numbers, 800% or whatever, I'd like to source them.
Need the real numbers.
Yes,
I
sir.
understand.
And I'm going. I mean,
That's-
I'd ask that for everybody.
That's understandable.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. I don't think we do not have any further speakers on the matters. I'll ask you if you want to go back to Chairman Wiedauer. There's no rule that says we have to stay till 5:30. But if there are, no, I mean, I'm a little light moment there. We're going to have Chairman Wiedauer come back, and if you have anything further to add, and then we asked the committee if they had questions to wait till after the speaker. So I would ask you if you had anything you wish to add, or you would just take a couple of questions. You have a question here from a committee. If you
Sure, I can wait on questions.
Okay.
Or,
you ready?
Sure.
Representative Burnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your bill, is it going to pay 100% for pre-K?
So that's the way the lottery is structured now.
Mhm.
Nothing changes. So how the lottery spends their money, this bill doesn't touch that. So obviously the lottery funds pre-K. So arguably, the more money that goes into the lottery, the more pre-K slots would be able to be opened up in Georgia.
So there's no
We don't dictate
percentages or anything like that?
We don't dictate anything in there.
Yeah, and let me help also answer it. I will get for the committee the operable portion of the Constitution that addresses how lottery funds are allocated and the priority that is embedded into the Constitution. But the gentleman is correct. This money would go in. This is another lottery game, and would go the same place as if they added another scratch-off ticket, and it would provide revenue. And then it is set in the Constitution how that money is to be taken care of. So if you will help me, we will get the link to or the hard copy of the Constitution that speaks to how those things are funded in priority order. That's a great question.
Okay, I have one more.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I know you probably can't answer this, but maybe we can find out. One of the issues, when you asked about issues, there is an issue because for years, those parents who could pay for their kids to go to college, they actually went on the backs of those in those underserved communities who were playing the lottery. And then when their children were time for them to go to college, then the money had started to decrease. which made it harder for them to go to college. And so if we're saying that we're going to have add this extra money, then there should be something in there for those children to still be able to go to school at the same rate that others have gone.
So where I'm completely empathetic to the question and the statement, and this kind of goes into what I was probably going to say is more of a closing argument, but I'll just kind of address it. You know, I didn't wake up one morning and go, you know what, dang, I really want to carry a sports betting bill. Okay? I feel more like being that I'm been a referee, or as I joked the other day, you know, the parent in the room. So no interested party in this is in the end going to be happy with me, quite frankly. You know, whether it's an operator that wants, you know, a lower tax rate, or an individual who wants to see more money going into, you know, specifically into pre-K. What I simply have tried to do with this is put the appropriate guardrails to protect Georgians, not open this up to conversations that don't belong in this specific bill. And unfortunately, that's where your question would fall, in my opinion, is that opens up. We get into an argument all day long on justifying how lottery money is being spent. I'll let that argument be that argument, and I welcome the argument. I'll welcome the conversation. But what I've really tried hard with this piece of legislation is really just to make it about what it's about. Keep fluff out of it. Clean. Make an opportunity for a legal avenue for people that are doing this illegally right now in Georgia, and protections for those that do, protections for those that, you know, are bad actors, or you know, punishments for those that are bad actors in this process. And that's my intent.
Thank you, Chairman Weedar. And again, Chairman, those are good questions. I will bring to the committee the hierarchy that is constitutionally ingrained, you know, that is ingrained in our Constitution about the priority of where the monies, you know, go in the order. And this committee has already this year, and we will again look at ways of allocating, you know, education dollars, and we can do that. But they are not predicated on the passage or non-passage of the item we have before us today. Chairman Knight.
Thank you. To my friend, I'm not sure who volunteered or if you volunteered, but you've done an excellent job, and a very, very, I guess, sticky bill. Certainly the issue's been going on for a while, and to my friend, he has done probably one of the best jobs I've seen of trying to, again, mediate, moderate the bill. So, one, I want to thank you for that, but I do have some legitimate questions.
Please.
You know, we are, as we look at the General Assembly, we're looking at a whole lot of measures as we get into funding the budget. You know, a lot of these things are for programs that are for folks that are in issues. I mean, we just talked about a completion grant, but yet we talked about gambling and young people and focus on that. So, you know, obviously there is an issue or correlation there of some of the same people who may be in the gambling world taking and spending money that otherwise they could have put forth to college. That's just one example. We continue to look at mental health issues, the addiction, you know, not only the direct effect on a person, but maybe their family, a lot of other things. And to me, it's a concern because we're always trying to put money into the budget here. And I guess as the mediator, I'd want or ask that you try to get some more statistics on that. We've heard all the good things about what the money could do or be used for education. We've heard that it could be protecting those who are gambling in other states, even though I don't understand what's going to keep somebody from continuing to gamble on another sports betting site. I don't bet. I don't understand how it works. But I don't understand how you keep people from doing just this legal activity when there's already illegal activities that they're doing. And I don't understand if that's geofencing or how that works, but I think these are the instruments by which you're gambling. You know, can you cut somebody off that lives in Georgia from gambling somewhere else? If it is and we're illegal, why aren't we doing it already? But that's a different question. But somehow some of the issues and I guess the repercussions from betting, I would like some more quantifiable information, because as you and I as appropriators, we're continuing to be asked for money or to help solve problems. And what I would hate to happen is for us to do something that's going to add to or exacerbate existing problems that we have, especially within the budget. And again, I want to thank my friend. He has done an excellent job. I appreciate what you've done, but if you could, as a moderator, maybe help get us some information there as we move forward.
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, we'll get that information. I would say that one metric, Chairman Knight, you might use is, if $10 million extra comes in, a place it could go was where we did with the completion grant last year, and we did $10 million, and that could impact 4,000 students. What we found so far is 3.5 million has impacted about 3,300 students. So I mean, there are places that the dollars can go, but I think Chairman Wiedeyer, you and I will work together to get the constitutional roadmap of where the money goes that goes into the Georgia Lottery Corporation, and some more metrics, around what happened. I will personally comment that I spoke with lottery personnel today, and actually was out of state this weekend. I have the lottery app on my phone, and I tried to use the Georgia Lottery, I think that's the name of the app, out of state, and you cannot do so. It does now. It does geolocate you. I mean, if you're 5 feet over the border in Alabama, I don't know how tight the geolocation is, but that geolocation is available in 2023. That is the I'm told by the Georgia Lottery, that's the type geolocation that these operators that operate in other states, were that if you have an account in Tennessee, you can't use it in Georgia, et cetera. So that's much better than it was in previous years. Yes, sir. Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a question for you, Mr. Chair, if you would.
Yes, sir.
Are you in the posture that most of the debate we've had today, the questions, have been on a micro level regarding specifics on the bill and specifics of the testimony? Will we have an opportunity once we get other data that we can ask the author some macro questions at the next hearing, or is this where you want them now?
No, well, I mean, I think we have time, and we were scheduled till 5:30 this afternoon. So when we can certainly stay here. If you have that question, I would say if you have what you refer to as a micro question, a specific question, or a more macro level question, but I would think sound that out. If we don't have the answer for it today, we won't try to figure it out on the fly, but we'll know when we come back, because again, this bill will be back, again and perhaps again until the questions are answered. And the committee is comfortable with movement, if the committee is so comfortable. So if you have that question, you're recognized for that purpose.
Okay, so let me just ask one question, and it might require further study into the statistics and the data that we know. So one of the concerns, so as an economist, we love multipliers. So we like to say, this is this much economic impact, and we'll throw out a multiplier of 5. We're going to multiply this thing, and it's moving through the community at such a level. And some of it, quite honestly, is made up. But there is some basis in fact by some of the multiplier effects. A concern that I have is the multiplier regarding, so if it's $100 million in revenue we bring in, are you concerned enough about, so there will be some damage. I mean, we can all acknowledge that. There will be some people that cannot afford to show their support for the Atlanta Braves in the next game they play against the dadgum Dodgers. And so I'm going to wager on that because I just have a good feeling about our pitching this year. But I don't have the money to I shouldn't say waste, to gamble. But I do have it in the account. I hadn't bought milk for my kids or clothes or whatever. The multiplier that I'm concerned about is, do we have the data that the people that are betting have sufficient disposable income? And what quartile, what percentage of those that, choose to have, a wager, a friendly wager on, the Braves or whatever sporting event, versus what that bell curve looks like and who is going to be in the middle in terms of disposable income, because those that are poor that will lose, there will be additional services required from the state to help in some. If that's part of the big part of the curve, or if it's on the small part of the bell curve, if you have the data for that.
Look, I was going to say, let me suggest we take that.
That would be a macro question.
And come back for a thing. But one thing that the chair would use to answer that question is, typically in these things, you mentioned the Braves and the Dodgers. Somebody's going to pick the Dodgers and somebody's going to pick the Braves. One of them is going to get their money back and more, right? So the money actually stays in the economy. It may switch hands, but it may actually stay in the economy more so than it would in a lottery game, where it goes in and it may go to the mega billion dollar winner in California. It could have been a Georgia company. It could have been a Georgia person. Right. But this is so. Can I see if I capture his question and ask you, Chairman Wiedauer, to maybe a flow for folks that don't understand what a sports bet looks like, that this to win this and somebody wins that, and where the money goes and how it may leave or not leave the community.
Sure. I think there might be two different questions, because I'll happy to go through that. I will say that being a UGA guy, Chairman Perkle, you almost lost me at quartile, but I try to stay on with you. Perfect. So I think what you're getting at is more, if you look at, let's say, there's 1,000 people betting, is the vast majority of them, or what number of them are actually, doing so in what I would say a responsible manner, and who are the ones that are kind of falling prey to chasing the bet. I don't have that data certainly in front of me, but I'll certainly do my best to lean on some of these operators. I don't know exactly what information they capture as far as, I don't think they go as far as getting somebody's tax returns. So I don't know if they'll have that kind of data on the type of individual that's using their platform, but I certainly will ask, and I believe I understood that question correctly. And to the chair's point, you've got, if somebody bets $100 and loses, obviously they've lost $100. If somebody bets $100, generally speaking, you're going to see something come back to them like they'll win 190 and the house is going to keep 10, and that's where their money. And that 10 is what we end up taxing. I think that's the simplified answer to what the chair asked.
Further questions to the gentleman? Further questions? I see no. Yes, sir.
I was just gonna close.
That's what. Yeah. I see no further questions. Please.
Thank you. Well, one, again, I want to thank the committee and the input. I want to thank everybody that testified here today. I think even those opposed to it would attest to the fact that I have an open door policy. Actually approached many of them before I even dropped the bill, so they would know the intentions or my intentions and my motives, and certainly stand here to continue to hear the concerns and do my level best to provide a we're not perfect bill, but as good of a bill as we can present on a sticky subject. So I just appreciate everybody, and I'll let you guys get on with your evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Wiedauer. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. There's continuing work on the bill. We'll let you know if it's ready for another hearing in the future. I would remind everyone that we will meet at our regular day tomorrow at 1 o'clock. A notice has been out, and a notice went out with new substitute language for the bills that we had been provided substitutes. Some of the bills are the original bills that we'll hear. I think House Bill 130, the law enforcement service cancelable loan. Don't think we have that substitute as yet, but we'll sound those bills as well as 4 more. We'll sound that bill as well as 4 more at 1 o'clock tomorrow. But there was, I want to draw specific attention because I know it's going, I'm already getting some emails on it. There is a new copy or a new sub for Chairman Carpenter's 131 that has some clarifying language in it that I would draw the committee's attention to and the public's, that there is a new, there is new language, and let me, the LC number on that we will entertain tomorrow is LC 491330S, and that was emailed to everyone that was on our that's on our higher ed list, meeting list. They should have been given that copy too. So we'll I want to thank the committee. We're going to have a busy week. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If there are no further questions or business before the committee, we'll stand adjourned without objection. Seeing none, we are adjourned.